Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to address the Peacebuilding Commission in these days. It is certainly an honor, again, to do this in the presence of President Duque. And I want to take this opportunity once again to reiterate my appreciation for the trust that you, Mr. President, that you have placed in the work of the UN in Colombia. I'll try to be rather short, as I know my colleague, the resident coordinator in Colombia, that we work very much together in these peace-building issues in the country, will also be joining us through BTC. But I will go through some areas of mainly a recent report, which, as the President has said, I'm sure there are many coincidences in our own assessments, and obviously also some of our differences in terms of appreciations, but we always, and that's something that I recognize from the President, that trust on the independent assessment that we make. Yesterday, as I said, I had the opportunity to brief the Security Council on the current situation. And the report highlights always this progress that has been made in the implementation of the peace agreement between the government and the former FARC EP, including on issues on the long-term success of the reintegration process, as well as the challenges that faces the consolidation of peace, especially in the territories most affected by violence and poverty. It also underlines the inclusive and participatory character of the recent congressional election. These are the second congressional elections that took place after the signing of the peace agreement, which included, for the first time, this election of 60 new seats for the special electoral districts for peace, giving voice, very important voice, to the regions most affected by conflict and particularly to victims. These elections also have been groundbreaking in many aspects. More than 28% of members of Congress will be women, a significant increase from the last election. Communities were also able to go to the polling stations unhindered. And issues pertaining to the Communist Party, the party that emerged after a successor, the guerrilla of FARC, their issues regarding their participation was addressed through institutional channels, with the support of the government, the support of the mission, and obviously their own representatives. The mostly peaceful character of the elections reflect also the significant changes that Colombia's democracy is undergoing, in part owing to the implementation of the peace agreement. In the report, again, the Secretary General also warns that there are important risks ahead, most significantly in the security aspect that affect former combatants, communities, social leaders, and human rights defenders, especially in conflict-affected regions. The Secretary General cautions about the growing threats facing key areas of implementation that deserve our full attention. Since the signing of the peace agreement, as you are aware, more than 300 former combatants, including 10 women, have been killed. And I referred in the Security Council yesterday on the importance of doing more to safeguard their lives beyond the measures that are currently in place that I constantly have recognized on the part of the efforts by the government. The persisting violence in several regions calls for the full implementation of the peace agreement, included but not limited to the security guarantees provision of the agreement. The chapters on rural reform, political reform that the President was also mentioning, and the fight against illicit drugs are intended to address these deep-rooted causes, deep-rooted factors that continue today to underpin dynamics of violence. Excellencies, distinguished ambassador and delegates, in the last report on peace building and sustaining peace, the Secretary General highlights that in today's world there are fewer political settlements to conflict, and that makes something also that was highlighted by the President, like cases like Colombia, are important exceptions which created opportunities to build and sustain peace. The meeting that the PBC had in Cartagena in 2020 introduced also a novel approach that took the PBC closer to those affected by conflict. And innovation, I have to say, has been also at the core of both the agreement and its implementation. the verification of the ceasefire through a tripartite mechanism, the extensive mainstreaming of gender throughout the accord, the inclusion of a special chapter that was mentioned also by the President on ethnic peoples, and the pioneering transitional justice are just examples on how the Colombian peace process is breaking new ground. The architecture of the agreement allowing for a continuous dialogue among the parties is in itself also a step forward. The UN mission, the country team, and relevant government agencies consult extensively with former combatants and with communities to target initiatives that add value to the process of strengthening social and economic fabric in areas historically torn by violent conflict. XB funding from diverse sources, including the PBF, bilateral donations, and DPPA, have all contributed in important ways to peace implementation. And as we move towards a new phase in the implementation of the peace agreement, there are many areas that still require attention. And I will highlight just three. First, the security in the regions where rising violence is afflicting communities that suffer the most during the many decades of conflict. Second, consolidating and strengthening the peace-building efforts in the territories. As the Secretary General highlights in his report, efforts should now concentrate in deploying state capacities to uphold citizens' rights and to ensure provisions of essential goods and services, including strengthening state presence in conflict-affected areas, and furthering long-awaited investments and reforms in remote rural areas. Third, supporting the transitional justice system, which is at the heart of the peace process. I welcome the commitment in this regard of the PBC and of the Peacebuilding Fund to support the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, and especially for the participation of victims in the transitional justice system. The issuance of the first restorative sentences expected later this year will be a major step in this historic process. I also welcome in this regard the PBF decision to further support the work of the Truth Commission as well as the Committee for Monitoring and Follow-up of its recommendations. Distinguished ambassadors and delegates, the final agreement remains an unprecedented opportunity to bring to fruition decades of peace-building efforts by Colombian society and institutions. Is in these decisive moments for the consolidation of peace when we most hasten our joint efforts to assist and continue to assist Colombia. And while robust funding is critical to sustaining and building upon the hard-fought gains of these years of implementation, it is equally, if not more important, to continue counting on your political support. And I thank you, Madam President.